All right, welcome everyone. Hello, 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 hello. How are you doing? Good? Welcome to the Covestro Arena at K2022. We now want to talk about energy because, well, the chemical industry has a huge role to play when it comes to transitioning to renewable energies. We all know that. And we want to find out how. What can we do? So maybe green power purchase agreements can be part of the solution, especially when it comes to decarbonizing the energy consumption. And we now have someone here from Ørsted. Ørsted is the largest wind power company in the world. Are you not? Yes, you are. He's nodding. So he will tell us now about what they do together with Covestro, and how we can together advance the transition to renewables. So please give him a big welcome, Rasmus Errboe from Ørsted.
Thank you very much.
And then we will take some time to take questions afterwards, but first, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here and listening to a guy like me talking about offshore wind at a very impressive conference like this. So hopefully I will be able to share something with you that you may have not heard before. That's my ambition. I would like to do three things. First of all, I would like to talk a little bit about Ørsted. So who are we and why are we here? Then I would like to talk a little bit about what it is that we have been doing together with the chemical industry in recent years. And then finally, talking a little bit about the challenges when you look ahead. What is basically in front of us. And then hopefully we will have time to do some Q&A if there is anything towards the end. Okay. It works well. So, Ørsted in a snapshot. Who are we? I think first of all, we are the global leader in offshore wind. We put up the very first offshore wind turbine in the world, actually, in Denmark more than 30 years ago. And we have today roughly 14 gigawatts of renewable capacity installed globally. If you include our awarded projects, we are at 18 gigawatt. And then towards 2030, we have an ambition to have 50 gigawatts of renewable capacity globally. Roughly 30 gigawatts of offshore wind, 17.5 onshore wind, and then a residual on P2X and bioenergy that I will come back to. If you look at the third bucket up there where it says renewable hydrogen and green fuels, also considering where we are today, it is important for me also to highlight that a little bit. And that is that we, a few years ago, decided that renewable hydrogen, P2X, green fuels, would have to be a very important part of our future offerings and our future business mix, also working with people like you. So what we have done over the years, in the recent years, is that we have worked hard to build up a pipeline of P2X opportunities. We are roughly at 10, you can say, projects right now in our portfolio. More than 3 gigawatts of P2X project that is. And we actually recently decided that this relatively small area for us, 70, 80 people, is actually so important that we recently decided to make it a separate business unit with a direct line to our group CEO. And the reason for that is that we firmly believe that this is a very important part of the future also for us. It cannot only be about offshore wind. We also have you can say, legacy business that we have also turned green in recent years. I'll come back to that in a second. so bioenergy and also some power plants, mainly in Denmark. So that is Ørsted in a couple of minutes. But this is, if there is one slide that I would like for you to remember when you think about who we are as a company, this would be it. Because you cannot really understand Ørsted without understanding the transformation story that we have been through. 15 years ago, we were first of all named Dong Energy, which is an abbreviation for Danish oil and natural gas. We were emitting more than a third of the CO2 of Denmark. I'm very aware, especially where I am today, and I know Denmark is a very small country, but still, it is something. And we were basically a Danish utility. We were not a global company. Within that 15-year period of time, up until today, we have completely transformed that narrative. We have reduced our CO2 emissions with more than 90% in that period of time, from scope 1 and 2, which is obviously a very dramatic reduction. And what we have also done in that period of time is that the share of our income coming from renewables has obviously, or has also increased dramatically to be more than 90% of our earnings. And that has led us to be at a point today where I can proudly say, even though it does sound a little bit self-serving, that we are the most sustainable energy company in the world. We have been receiving that award, you can say, 3 times now in a row, and we are the most sustainable energy company in the world. And that you can also see in our sustainability targets, where we have a target of being carbon neutral, scope 1 and 2 in 2025, so very, very soon. And we stick to that target despite what is going on. And then we also have a target of becoming fully carbon neutral in our entire footprint, including scope 3 emissions by 2040. But a very important point that I will also come back to listening to this transformation story is the following. Yes, it does look impressive, and it has been a hell of a ride, but we did not see anything 15 years ago that was not evident to everyone. We didn't have a crystal ball where we could see, oh, offshore wind is gonna blow up. We were not sitting on some pattern or something that was special to us. We just saw something that was available to everyone in the market, which was the clear view that over time, the generation capacity globally would have to go towards renewables. We did see the constraints within onshore and solar, and saw offshore wind being a very good option. But that's it. So we basically just, you can say, some good people before me took 1, 2 very good strategic decisions, yes. But our transformation story is more about commitment and execution, execution, and execution, rather than inventing something special. I will leave that as a cliffhanger, and I might come back to that in the end. If we then start looking a little bit around here, sort of where am I today? So of course, when we look at the chemical sector from our perspective, the first thing we see is obviously that the chemical sector is today and will be in the future the biggest off-taker of electrons. It is the biggest and therefore also most important sector when it comes to electrification. And also a sector where, if we get this right together, the prospects for the world is obviously very, very significant. The way we go about it in Ørsted is that we are still on a journey. And part of the journey that we are on right now is to an increasing sort of level focus our business towards people like you, to be much more customer-centric than we have been in the past, but we have focused more on the electricity generation part. So we basically look at, there are 3 verticals that are of interest to us, and where we really would like to collaborate and go the extra mile together with our partners. And that is the chemical sector, it is steel, and it is global tech. And this chart partly shows you why that is. If we then zoom in a bit more and start talking about what I was actually invited to talk about, and being sort of at risk of it becoming a bit technical, but I'm sure you'll manage. And that is talking about corporate PPAs. So as it says, long-term power purchase agreements here. What is this? And why is it important for you to have a view on this as an industry? So what it is basically a contract where the off-taker, so the company who will be using the power, acquires that from the developer, such as Ørsted or any other colleague of ours producing offshore wind, solar, onshore wind, etc. And these agreements come in very different shapes and forms. And I will not go into all of that level of detail today. All I will say is that typically what this is for us is it's a long-term contract. So that is typically 10 plus years. The one we have done together with Thomas and the team here in Covestro is 10 years. But we did it in 2019. And it was for a wind farm that will have COD, so first power in 2025. So it is, you can basically say from 19 to 35. But the actual tenor of the agreement is 10 years. And you see that going all the way up to 25 years. I will not stand here and talking about the lifetime of an offshore wind farm. That's a bit sensitive. But 25 years is obviously a very, very long time. And therefore, to me, this becomes more of a partnership rather than a sort of purchasing relationship. It typically has a fixed price. And what that does for you is that it locks in your OPEX, you can say, from the agreement. You get rid of the exposure from the power price. What it does for me, if that's the construct, is that it gives me revenue certainty. Of course, today, with power prices up here and my PPAs here, of course there will be years where they will be in the money or out the money, but that's fine. For me, what matters is the predictability, because that allows me to build more wind farms. Typically, a power purchase agreement is also linked to a specific asset. So like for you, you have acquired 100 megawatt out of a 900 megawatt, 920 megawatt German wind farm that I'll come back to. But we also increasingly see virtual PPAs where the likes of, for instance, Amazon, more sort of acquire a bunch of PPAs that are not specifically linked to individual assets, but more from a portfolio perspective. There are pros and cons with both, but that is what we see out there. Why would you do this? So obviously, achieving sustainability targets is, I don't need to talk about the climate change. So that is, of course, a goal in itself. And some companies sort of move faster than others. Some have more sort of commitment and foresight, but overall the trend is clearly there. It mitigates the power price exposure. I talked about that. And then there is this last point that also is a bit technical, but that I would like for you to be aware of. And that is the last bullet up there where it says additionality. So when a chemical company acquires a significant part of an offshore wind farm that we intend to build, and that we may not have been able to build had we not done that agreement, then you can say through the partnership, more green electrons gets available to the world and to you. Which is fundamentally different from acquiring green power for something that is already there today. That doesn't really change the needle in any way. There was supposed to be a bit more on this. There it is. All is good. Again, I will not go into details here, so don't worry. But what I will say is that I often get the question. So you know, not from you, because not from Covestro, because this is you several years ago. But I sometimes get the question. So we would like to get the green electrons. How can we do that? And you can basically do it roughly in 4 different ways, from left to right here. So you can go out and you can buy certificates. You can do on-site production. So you can put up solar panels on your factory, an onshore turbine in the lawn in front of your factory. You can participate together with a developer such as us on the equity side. So basically co-invest in, for instance, an offshore wind farm, or you can do a corporate PPA. And then the next question I often get is, okay, fine, which one is the best? Which I can understand. I would ask the same. And my annoying answer to that question will be, it depends. It depends on your investment profile. It depends on your risk appetite. It depends on sort of your capabilities. What kind of capabilities would you like to develop? It depends on your land availability. Do you have space or don't you? It depends on where are your sites located. Are they close to shore? Are they in the middle of the country? What parts of the world? And so on, and so on, and so on. But what I am comfortable saying is that I do believe that bucket, as you can also see from the chart, that the 2 last buckets, so the equity investment and the corporate PPAs, would be a good way to go about it. And if that would be the case, for the reasons that I just showed on the slide, then, and forgive me, the next 2 minutes will be the most self-serving of everything I will be saying right now, but I cannot help doing it because I think it is relevant. If it is offshore wind, Ørsted is the global leader of offshore wind. But we are also the global leader in terms of the company who has entered into the most offshore wind corporate PPAs by a pretty significant margin. And we have been able to do so by partnering up with bold companies, such as Covestro. So the first sort of groundbreaking corporate PPA we did on our German wind farm was with Covestro. It was also the world's biggest by then. Today we are at a place where we have significant corporate PPAs with Covestro, with Rewe Group, with Amazon, with Google, with BASF, with TSMC. So we are building up a capability and a portfolio based on that blueprint that we have very much developed in the beginning together with you. And just to give you one fact in terms of the scale we are talking about here. this is far away, but in Taiwan, the corporate PPA we have done with TSMC, which is the world's biggest semiconductor company, is a 20-year corporate PPA for the total output of a 920 megawatt offshore wind farm. Think about that. So therefore, in terms of what this can do, there is no reason why a big European chemical company will not be able to take the entire output of an offshore wind farm. Why not? That's what we have seen in Taiwan some years ago. When we partner up in Ørsted, we basically do it in 3 different ways. So we have a lot of, so if you want to get into a wind farm, you can say, then there is one way of getting in there. But that is typically mostly to financial partners. That is basically we build the wind farm and then we sell typically half of the wind farm to a partner. That we have done, I think, 15 times or something around the world. But I think what is more interesting is the next bucket on the right-hand side, which are the offshore wind co-development partnerships. So this is basically where we team up with someone who would like to be part of owning a wind farm. And we do that for many different reasons. We have done it, and we typically do it when we have complementary capabilities, you can say. So we have done it in Poland, in US, in APAC, many different places where we do these development partnerships. And then finally, the energy transition co-development partnerships are more related to P2X. So we have a big project in Denmark called Green Fuels for Denmark. We have a big project in the Netherlands called CH2-land, where we partner up with aviation companies, with heavy transportation companies, with chemical companies, with fertilizer producers, everyone who will benefit from the P2X, the green hydrogen. Cautious of time, I will only spend 1 minute on this one and the next one as well, so we can have time for questions if there are any. This is basically, it's a bit dense, but basically what this is basically saying that the phase we are currently in when it comes to renewables is a phase where we just rapidly need to build out renewables across Europe. And that, and with the targets that we see now from the European Commission, with 450 gigawatts by 2050, this cannot be happening fast enough. And as I always say, when it comes to offshore wind, 2030 is today, 2040 is tomorrow, and 2050 is the future. We need to act now and balance the short term with the long term. But the next phase, the phase that is in front of us, where it will be more about integrated solutions, system integrations, that is a phase where we from Ørsted see a huge role for our partners, especially within the chemical industry. And if we have time in the Q&A, we can come back to why that is. And this is the last one. It is basically just to show you the picture and remind you about the totality of the energy system that we are talking about here, and how we are moving from a point where it for us is only about the offshore wind farm into it being about the integrated system that we are creating together with our partners. I think I will stop it there, mindful of time, and then move to questions.
Thank you, Rasmus. I want to invite Thomas Rømer to join us from Covestro. Just to get the Covestro perspective, you talked a little bit about it. So, Thomas, before we open it up to the audience, tell us about the Covestro perspective. Why are you partnering with Ørsted? What was the motivation, and what's the current status quo?
I think Rasmus put it very well. Like Ørsted, we like to be first movers, and in 2019 we signed the first large corporate PPA. And I think Rasmus put it also very nicely on the time dimension. Let's take a look back. We started topping off our energy demand. We bought a small fraction of our energy demand as green molecules, but we also have announced that we want to be Scope 1 and Scope 2 neutral, not as early as you, but in 2035. And this is why we need partners like Ørsted to do exactly that, to come from the top off of our energy demand to the base load and energy demand. And very important, I would be interested in your view on that, that we don't use the energy only for as electricity, but we use it also as power to X, as you mentioned. And in order to solve the riddle for the chemical industry, 24/7, 365 days a year for all our products, we do not only need electricity, but we do need hydrogen, we do need ammonia. And this is also where companies like Ørsted and Covestro have to continue to team up. So what kind of challenges, Rasmus, do you see for the chemical industry? I know you talk to tech companies, you talk to steel companies, but what would be your view?
Thank you, Thomas. It's a bit humbling for me to be here today as probably the only person in the room without a chemical background and then talking about your challenges. But I'm going to give it a go. I think first of all, it comes back to the chart I showed before about the demand. So what you actually need in terms of green electrons, it is massive. And that also means that the renewable build-out need to happen at a pace that is very different from the pace that we have seen in the last decade. So just one fun fact. If you want to get to the gigawatt targets by 2050, you would have to install in 1 year, by 2030 you will have to install 20 gigawatts of offshore wind in 1 year, which is roughly the same as we have today globally. So you can say a bit cute, but it has taken us 30 years to do 20, and in 8 years we would like to do 20 every year. Mm-hmm. So that calls for a step change, and that also brings the challenge to you. Mm-hmm. Because if that's not happening, you will not get the green electrons that you need for all the things you mentioned, Thomas. So I think that's one of the challenges I see. But I cannot talk about a challenge without also talking about the opportunity. Because I do believe that you have a very significant opportunity in front of you. Because this is not about the green electron only anymore. This is about system integration. Mm-hmm. And here I do see the chemical sector as a sector having a capability and an understanding of the integrated energy system. You also sit on important parts of the infrastructure. So there are some components here that when you pair your way of doing business with the way that people like me and what I represent do business, that is where I think that it will have the potential to make that step change on volumes.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. So we have a few minutes left. Just open it up to the audience. Do we have any questions from the audience? Live here or there are digital channels? Yes.
Hello. You explained that there are PPAs which are related or linked to assets and also virtual PPAs. Do you think that there is a difference, or will there be a difference in future for the acceptance for GHG protocol, science-based targets and whatever?
That's a good question. And the answer is that we are not there yet. But I think over time, I think from a GHG perspective, both things would have to be acceptable. I think there is a very good example here on something that is not in place now, but needs to be in place. And that is the possibility of entering cross-border PPAs, where you basically take some of the power from the north and use it for industrialization in the south in Europe. Right now, there are some regulatory constraints on the ability to enter into cross-border PPAs, which is also partly related to your question, that are not solved. So I think over time, absolutely it would have to be treated in ways that all of it is possible. It cannot only be one PPA linked to one physical asset. If that will be the case, we will not make it.
All right. Thank you for that question. I'm looking at the time. Maybe one more question. Do we have anyone? Last chance? Yes.
Hi, Rasmus. So we are currently in an energy crisis. And the best way to face a crisis is to brace itself and find synergies. Which type of synergy do you see between the chemical and the power industry that which can be used during this crisis especially?
That's a good question. It comes back a little bit, Julio, to what I mentioned before about the complementary capabilities of the developer and the chemical industry when it comes to system integration. There is also something on the circular economy that is also an obvious synergy, if you will, between us, where I know that you, for instance, are supplying materials to our turbines through our suppliers. Yep. That's another good example. But if you put it in the context of the existing crisis, as you did, because those, you can say, synergies would be relevant disregarding. From a regulatory perspective, I genuinely believe, take Germany as an example, I genuinely believe that we in many ways are seeing and should be seeing the challenges the same way. Of course, if you look at a cap on the gas price, that's of course sort of a separate conversation. But in terms of having a united front between the developers and the chemical industries on the framework for the longer term, it's very important that we don't mess up the long term to get the short term right. We need to get both right. That's just the way it is. So therefore, I do believe that from a regulatory perspective, there are synergies. Both of us need faster permitting of renewables. None of us would like to see uncapped concession payments, and so on. So I think there are many synergies, if you will, between renewable industry and the chemical industry.
All right, thank you so much. Now we're out of time, but it goes to show that, you know, we have to keep working on these joint solutions, find partners to collaborate, and then together we can advance this transition to renewables. Thank you so much, Rasmus, for being here. Thank you, Thomas. This is your applause. All right. Thank you.